Hey everyone, Anders Sundquist here, host of the podcast Lean In. And today we're going to be talking about the AI in recruiting buzzword of the day, Copilot, also known as agentic workflows, specifically around sourcing. And so we're going to unpack what that means, how to find the right tool for you, and how much automation you might want to explore. It's definitely buzzword of the day, but it's also an important thing to be aware of because there's a lot of categories this can touch, including security, privacy, efficiencies, and we're going to talk about all those buzzwords too. And so with me today, I have VPTA Kirk Okenquist, a fellow Quist. Don't hear too many of us out there, but it's great to have you on the show today. And he is VPTA at Motive. And so we're going to talk about some of the Copilot discovery that you've done, some of the tools that you're aware of, and more so mechanically how they work and how TA leaders can hopefully increase efficiency in their teams. So, without further ado, I want to say I'm really grateful that you're on the show today, and it would help the audience understand a little context. So, tell us your journey. What's your story? Did you major in recruiting? How did you get to this glorious role?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And two quists do make a right,
Nice.
right? No, it's good to see a fellow Scandinavian, of course. My journey, oh my gosh. It's funny that you said major in recruiting. I think that's one of my first lines when recruiting a recruiter, either,
Right.
Senior recruiter, mid-level recruiter, or junior. I was like, none of us plan to do this in our career. But when I go back and think about my college career and time at university, I actually interned as a sourcer. I'm not going to say the
Wow.
year. It was a long time ago, but I felt like I got a master class, in between classes of how to become a sourcer on the agency side when I was in school. And it was just an amazing jumping point for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So from there, actually stayed at the agency for first couple of years to cut my teeth, understand the business from that side. Mainly on the contract placement side, I was actually an associate with account temps.
Oh yeah.
You don't hear that name too
I think you're
often.
still around. Yeah. Yeah.
I know. Bob from account temps, right? Those were classic radio ads that were out there when I was growing up and my folks were driving me to school.
Yep.
And I became one of those guys, which was amazing. But a lot of thanks and just incredible support from the Robert Half family over the years to help me springboard my career and get on, kind of pivot to the in-house side. So it was just amazing to cut my teeth on the agency side. Again, learn how to be that middle person between the candidate and the client, kind of balance expectations from both ends. And then I was very fortunate to land a position with MuleSoft, who kind of exists, doesn't really exist anymore, but
Salesforce. Yeah.
exactly, yeah, AKA
Yeah.
Salesforce, yeah, and nothing is more appealing than the middleware space
Yeah.
within software. Trying to explain what MuleSoft did to friends and family and my parents for the 4.5 years that I was there. Every time they're like, "Sounds great, we wish you nothing but the best. We have no idea what you do." But that was an amazing journey. And like you said, I got to experience going through an IPO and then an acquisition.
Yeah.
So that was just an amazing experience. And of course, when you go through that, you think, oh, this happens at every startup,
Yeah.
right?
Everyone exits, right? This is great. Liquidity for all.
Exactly. Exactly. What are we, nine, no, 7, 5, yes, but do quick math here. 7 years post the IPO-ish, somewhere around there. I have yet to experience another one. And we all know why, right? The crazy macro and micro effects of the economy here.
Right. Crazy.
Exactly, exactly. So, but no, I found myself at a company called Join Keep Truckin' 19 after a quick stint at Dialpad Voice over IP company, which is now an AI company. Always had been. We were at the forefront of natural language processing, and so learning that in 2018.
Wow.
I was so far ahead of the curve and working with deep think and yeah, partners on the engineering side and hearing them talk about NLP models then and learning accents and just the way that it has grown and developed today is amazing. And then found myself, as I was mentioning, at KT, which we called it back in the day, in 2019 before COVID. So I've survived COVID. We changed our name to better serve really the customers and the industries that we serve today. We are now called Motive. And I've been here for 5.5 years, which is
Wow.
amazing. So yeah.
Congrats. Yeah. And in the tech and recruiting world, it's like dog years. That's a part of a lifetime. And so clearly a growth journey, an exciting growth journey had motive driven by the TA team. So, what we're going to unpack today is the tools and infrastructure, especially as it relates to AI tooling and Copilot or agentic features. And so, but first, set a little context for us. So, what's the TA team size today? How many recs are you responsible for? And then tell us a bit about your ecosystem, your tool ecosystem, and why you made the decisions that you did.
Yeah. No, I think it's a good question. And I have made a habit in my career, even when I was not in leadership and then got into running a sourcing team and then graduated to be a recruiting leader, because that's how you did it back in the day, right? You didn't make that jump all at once. I tried to demo as many tools as I could,
Yeah,
to be honest with you.
same.
And I had a very unique experience at MuleSoft. My boss, Leslie Crow, who was just an amazing leader, visionary. She had a very good friend who had an idea for something that could help us out on the CRM side. And that ended up being the founder and CEO of Zen Sorcerer, AKA Gem today. So shout out to Steve there, right?
Love it, Jim.
And just always being curious and understanding what was out there in the market. But the other thing that I did is I went and bothered sales, because
Sure.
sales always tells us about maybe even 10 years and down the road, or maybe 5 years down the road, of like what tools will be available in recruiting that are available today in sales. So I had sales loft seats for my sourcers,
Oh
and Steve
wow.
Barteld is like, why do you have sales loft seats? Like, explain that to me. So, I was like, well, this is what they need, the automation, so that we can create the efficiency. So in terms of the team that I manage today, very fortunate to run this team. It is 70 strong globally. At one point in time, it was over 100, which was very large, and we were on pace to hire a lot of individuals. We have a substantial offshoring at somewhere I won't mention, right? Because it's a big benefit to us. But about half my team is in this area of the world. It sounds so mysterious now. I promise it's not. If you go digging in Motive, you'll find out where we are. But it's just been a game changer for us. So within that 70, I have managers, I have
Yep.
operations individuals, we did build a sourcing function offshore there, and a little bit domestically too. And this team, any given month, 150 to 200, signatures every 30 days.
Yeah.
It's kind of the pace that we're running at today. So that gives you an idea of the landscape and the pacing on our side.
And when you look at in terms of the hiring volume, talk a bit about, and this is going to feed into the tooling architecture that you've chosen, but the split on, let's just be generic, like tech and non-tech roles, and then hire origin. Where are those hires coming from? Just high level, talk about that for our audience today, and then we're going to get into like how we can use tooling to more efficiently screen candidates, provide a better candidate experience,
Yeah.
and then onboard them.
Yeah, good question. The way that I thought about building this team, it really is to the needs of the business, right? You have to think about the headcount plan that's being released from finance, and then you go shop that headcount plan with the business, with the engineering leaders, with the go-to-market leaders, and say, hey, how close is this to reality? Do you really want to do this, right? Where can we, potentially miss? Where can we accelerate?
Yeah.
And then from there, you have to understand how much human interaction that's going to take, right? What is the lift, right, for those positions? Is it mainly junior? Is it a mix of mid junior? Is it, are we going enterprise? Are we going up market? Which Motive has done over the last couple of years. The more senior you go, the
Mhm.
more human lift it requires, right? Because each one of these roles is so specific, requires a lot more sourcing, a lot more attention. Then you add in the market complexity, right? Which, we are paid to be experts on. If I need to hire a staff level engineer in the Bay Area, what does that look like right now? Is that challenging? As you and I both know, there's been so much offshoring. It's actually the lightest that it's been, in probably 10 years that we've seen the competitive landscape. Not to say that it's not competitive, it's just not
Yeah, it's
what it
very
used to
different.
be. Yeah,
Right.
it is very different. So you have to consume all that, and you have to understand exactly the human element of your team, and how big that is that going to be. And then you have to go out and you have to try and find efficiency with tooling.
Yes.
Right. So I already named one, GEM. I think it's great automation. It's the initial automation that, we ever had. Right. And again, it was born from a sales tool. Right. So that's really, where we can see the future there. In terms of like operations, scheduling, things like that, there are some amazing tools out there that are powered by AI. We are using one today called Modern Loop. I use it to do my own scheduling, which is amazing because then I don't have to go bother one of our coordinators who is extremely busy and has a 5-to-1, recruiter to RC ratio. It's weird that that's baked into my brain. So where we have tried to spend some time over, I would say, the last year, is understanding the AI market in terms of sourcing efficiency, right? Sourcing gain, right? Where can we, and I'm going to use this term or word called a bot. It is a bot, right? And we're all used to sourcing bots. They've been around for 10 years,
Yes.
right? I remember you remember when you would fill them out and then they'd say, just send it and then go to sleep. And then you wake up in the morning and there's, hundreds of candidates. We get a dozen maybe, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Quality was a little off, but right.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe one of them would be somewhat close to what we were looking for. There's still some of that out there, right? In all the assessment that I've done in some of the tools. I've seen one recently that actually caught my eye more than anything because it is really starting to, they're training the technology to understand, like, let's just go after sales recruiting, right? Exactly. Where you see a lot of these tools are like, oh yeah, you can use this, for anything, any kind of role, just go get them. And the hard part that I have with that, like you were mentioning, Anders, is if the adoption isn't there on the team, then
Yeah.
you've just wasted a ton of, wasted time, you've
Yeah.
wasted money,
Yeah.
enablement, all those things. And I've had to learn the hard way on that with the team. And then we're all unfortunately held hostage, for good, for better. It's yet to be decided by our LinkedIn spend.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't be
The
competitive in
incumbent.
this market. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
totally. I mean, I think LinkedIn is the incumbent, and there's AI features in enterprise LinkedIn now. And I won't unpack those today, but actually want to come up high level and define Copilot, define agentic sourcing for our audience today,
Hmm.
and then talk a bit about some of the landscape discoveries that you made, and then kind of hone in on that. I'll take a stab at it first. Is like this is relatively new. The concept of automation has been around for a decade. I agree. The concept of a full copilot or a human in the loop copilot, which I'll describe my interpretation. There might be a different understanding here, but like there's tools now where you can give a job description or a prompt and talk with and almost act as a prompt engineer and calibrate with a few feedback loop cycles, and then let that bot or that copilot run autonomously and send emails on your behalf, and then even interact with candidates on your behalf, and then even screen them. And so when we're talking about full copilot, if you're tuning in today and wanted to learn about AI tools, what I'm learning is the landscape is changing so fast, you may not know what's even out there today. And there's a couple tools I understand fit into each of these buckets, and I could be wrong in these labeling of these buckets, but there's tools that are full copilot and can even screen candidates for you. I've heard of tools like technologies.AI, and I'll shout out to some comments on the pod here, but check out that tool for something that's full copilot, and I've heard that works for all kinds of roles. But people often say when you're looking at full copilot, maybe less senior, maybe those candidates are more willing to talk to an AI agent because they are less senior in nature. There's tools that are more human in the loop where there's that calibration piece from a job description, and then the bot, if you will, can go email candidates based on that initial criteria that fit. And maybe something like Juicebox AI fits in that category where there's this agentic outreach but not the actual screening. And then there's more of the AI conversational piece. I think legacy sourcing tools like Seek Out have a component now where you can communicate and say, find me a software engineer in the Bay with Java and JavaScript.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so there's these different tiers, right? And then with that comes different fears from TA leaders about
One of my
security.
favorite bands. Love it. Yeah.
Yes. But tell me, so as we talked about, so there's these tiers of, let's call it agentic outreach that can happen. But when you did your discovery, what did you find? Did you find these tiers as well? And what did you arrive at as the right choice for motive?
Yeah. We're still trying to figure out the right one for us on the outbound sourcing side. We have crashed and burned with a few, and I'll tell you why. They being the platform or the people that are creating the platform, they don't understand the workflow of the recruiter. And I say this when someone tries to pitch me something new, I'm like, okay, where do I have to go with your, like, what is your tool? Is it its own platform? Is it its own thing? Or does it sit on top of something that my team can use?
Application layer, sure.
Exactly. Thank you for that. The best one that I have seen recently, it's in Slack,
Whoa,
which
tell
is
me more.
amazing. Yeah. So I can't mention the name because we're still trying to figure out a contract and a demo and things like that. But it's why I apparently it's why, and it's so funny when they tell me that they're widely used and they tell me all these names. I'm like, why didn't I hear from my friend over there? You literally spin up the search in Slack and you create like a Slack channel, and then the intelligence comes on and it's natural language processing, and you just talk to it like you and I are talking to one another, and it learns and it says, yeah, great. I'm going to send you about a dozen profiles, at every other hour or so as we go. But it's specialized in sales, which
Okay.
is great. So they're not trying to boil the ocean. They're trying to
Yep.
focus on their own area.
Yep.
And the demo was killer, right? I mean, I was blown away by the demo. I'm like, wow, this thing really works the way that they say it works, which we've all been promised, so many times in this recruiting space, right? This tool is going to solve everything that, all of your issues and your problems. And I hope it does. And I hear great feedback from those that are using it today. But I think that's the key, is it's the workflow,
Yeah.
right? Like, I can't tell you how many times, we have utilized other, I won't name them, but
Yeah. Yeah.
other products. It's like, don't go to LinkedIn, don't go to your greenhouse, go to our software and
Yes.
hang out in our software. And I'm like, okay, well, the first thing the recruiter's going to try and do is, I need to go to LinkedIn because that's my
Exactly.
safety space.
I mean, and then it begs the question. So when I talk to TA leaders about any tool, whether it's, a Copilot tool, any tool in the recruiting process, is adoption can be an issue. And often licenses are purchased, they're encouraged to use said tool, and then they don't because it doesn't fit in the workflow, like you
Exactly.
described. And then there's waste, and then there's
Yeah.
churn.
Well, that's why I brought up LinkedIn, because you're
Yeah.
paying so much money for LinkedIn and then
Yeah.
you go pay for another product,
Yeah.
and this product is saying, don't go to LinkedIn, go to our
Yeah.
platform, our software, our space.
Yeah.
And then recruiters like, well, you're paying me to recruit, let me recruit. By the time, and the unfortunate experience that we've had is, by the time that we have tried to teach this technology how to do what we do, I could have found 50 people, in half the time, right? So this is really the first demo that I've been a part of where it's within Slack, which we
Okay.
all use and unfortunately live by now. It's not disruptive. And guess what it sends you? It sends you LinkedIn profiles,
Interesting.
because that's the way we consume candidates,
Yeah.
right? It's baked in our bread. There's nothing we could do. We can read resumes. We all hate resumes. I'll admit it, right? It really is linked. I mean, that's just how our brain and our minds and our processing works. And that's just kind of what I've seen so far in the market. We are 2 weeks in to actually using the agent recruiter,
Okay.
the automated RPS,
Wow.
with a tool called Talent Llama. It's a very strong demo partnership that we are a part of today. It has, like I said, 14 days in. This is with junior level SMB sales AEs in
Okay.
another country, offshored.
Yep.
So they've already interviewed. My manager is telling me about 50 candidates
Okay.
in the span of 14 days. Again, we're gating that, right?
Yep.
But
Yep. Throttling.
the
Yeah.
exactly, but the amount of interest that we get in this country, I mean, we get my team receives 11,000 to 13,000 inbound applications a week.
So let me clarify here for the audience. So this tool, so Talent Llama, is
Yes,
screening. This is a bot
that it
that is
is.
screening human candidates.
That's right.
Thus far, you've experienced, or Talent Llama has conducted on your behalf, 50 screens from this massive
That's
TAM. It sounds
correct.
like
That's
thousands of
correct.
users.
Yes.
Tell us more about how you architected or prompted or set up the tool. And I'm sure there's others synonymous tools to Talent Llama that can do this. And so if you're curious, we'll tag that as well. And you can message Kirk to learn more. But I think there's a lot of fear or misunderstanding about prompting or setting up or architecting this so that it's safe, so that it's consistent, so that there's a good candidate experience.
Mhm.
Tell us more how you did that.
Yeah. So I was at a dinner the other night and I shared this,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
everybody looked at me like,
Yeah.
"Oh my God, you did
You're
it? Like
doing what?
you pulled the trigger? Like how's it going?" And I'm like, "It's very early. How did you get this through business systems and IT and legal?" It took about a month, but we got it done. So the way that I'm thinking about it is when engineers at any level, well, mainly mid to junior, when they apply, we send them directly to some sort of a take-home test,
Yeah.
right? A coder pad, a code signal, a carrot. We even know carrot was guided by an engineer. Amazing
Yep.
company, by the way.
Yep.
Um, I
I
thought
was on
about
the
it
phone with
in
Jeff
this
earlier today.
exactly. That's so funny. I thought about it in the same way, right? Like engineers have been doing this for 10 years,
Yeah.
and they have learned, that this is just the process.
Yeah.
The other thing that I was thinking about, which I mentioned, the volumes that we're receiving. If we're receiving 11 to 13,000 inbound applications a week, we're barely clearing out those applications as quickly as we're receiving them. We're not, right? We're running 10, 15 days old, which drives me crazy because I want every, if you take the time to apply to us,
Yeah.
I want you to hear from us, good, bad, ugly, whatever it is.
Or
I
otherwise.
think that's just, yeah, I think that's just a commitment that we should have as recruiters. And for anybody listening to this, like that is critical to candidate experience. Now, what the candidates decide to do with that, that is outside of our control. If they didn't get a job and they're upset about that, there's nothing you can do about that. You have to let it go. But you have to make the effort to recognize that they have made the effort to come and try and find you and apply. So what I was thinking, which, you and I were chatting about this, before, if we're not getting to these candidates within a week, 10 days, 12 days, what if a technology, even if it's not a human being, can give them that on-time experience and even screen them
Yeah.
before my team could have even looked at their profile, given the volume that we are up against, and then tell them, hey, you're going to meet the recruiter or you're not. To me, I feel like that's an incredible experience, right? Based on what we're facing today. Now, I could be dead wrong, and there could be some people who say, I'd rather wait 10, 12, 15 days and then hear from a human being or get your thanks, no thanks rejection email. I have a hard time with that, right? And I think that we're all infusing AI into our lives slowly, but I mean, think about the customer service experience with like an airline. You used to be able to pick up the phone and call somebody. Now
Yeah.
you're chatting with them on your
Yeah.
app or on that's acceptable. It's
Yeah.
acceptable, right?
It's the
You can't
standard.
talk to anybody on
Yeah.
an airline anymore. I'm thinking about it in the same way. And I know we're at the forefront and I know it's early and I know a lot of people will disagree with me, but I do think this is coming and I don't think there's anything we can do about it and we have to embrace it.
Well, I agree. And I applaud you for experimenting in the space to begin with, because I think that it is coming and it is happening. I think how where the equilibrium is still to be determined,
Yeah.
and I think it's to be determined. If I'm honest, I think there's two perspectives. One is from the business, right? What kind of efficiencies can we see without losing an experience for finding great employees? That's what we
Yeah.
need to do. And then on the flip side of that market is the candidate experience. If there's not enough human touch or personalization or authenticity, then they're going to go to an organization that has that. So I think there is a balance, but it makes me wonder, like, in this workflow, is there a way to create an optionality? Perhaps the bot and whatever tool it is says, would you prefer to talk to a bot and do an initial screen today with these questions curated by motive, or see if your
Yeah.
candidacy is approved for a human screen, and that might be
Yeah.
in 2 weeks, or whatever the workflow is. But maybe this optionality is something we arrive at in the future. It makes me think of when I'm calling the airline, sometimes I'm 00000. I need a human, and sometimes that's something I do.
Yeah, no, I understand. The way that we're trying to test this, right? And the control is one role, one recruiter, right?
Okay.
So we don't go crazy, but the volume has been decent. And the feedback that I've received from the recruiter already is you've given me back 50% of my time. already just in 2 weeks. She's like, I've been able to do almost double the amount of work in the last 2 weeks than I ever have been in the
Wow.
past. Because then if the bot clears it, right, if they clear talent wall and we get a really nice digest of the interview, they do have some scoring. Obviously, none of us would be able to reject a candidate based on scoring. She has the digest, she can read the narrative, and then she can go listen to the call as well, right? Because we have to take tests for language as well in this country as well, because it's not an English first
Sure.
speaking country.
Sure.
So it kind of kills a few birds, right? In that way. And then what the experience or the feedback that she gave me the other day was, then when I call them and tell them, hey, congratulations, you have passed this round, I am a real person, they're like,
Got
that
it.
was great. They're like, and she's like,
Wow.
I'm on the phone with them for maybe 10, 12 minutes, and I'm just, here's the rest of the process. Talk to me about compensation just confirming the things that were in the list. Do you have any questions? No. And by the way, the bot experience was great.
Wow. So
So far, it's been good. Yeah.
it's almost like, so what I'm hearing, this is anecdotally, right? And I'm sure this could scale. It sounds like it could scale, in Motive and other organizations, but it might be that the new future we arrive at is, and a Copilot or agentic world provides a better candidate experience because the relationship. So this recruiter sounds like she has more time to build relationships.
Yes.
And that's
Yeah.
really what recruiting is all about. So, and my hope is that with this new future that we're in AI and recruiting, is that we can have, there's a lot of noise right now. Let's all be honest. Recruiting has been, there's frustration, let's call a spade, where candidates are struggling to get through the noise through the bot applicant tools that are out there too, where there are 1,000 you're talking about tens of thousands of applicants. How many are real? Right. And then there's frustration there. There's fake jobs out there that are built by a bot as
Yeah.
well to attract. And
Create pipeline.
yeah, so there's
Yeah.
so there is a lot of, I think, disruption happening. But what I'm hearing is that when applied authentically and honestly, in this case, there's a world where the recruiter can provide a better candidate experience because they are focusing on relationships.
Yeah. Well, if I can give her this time back, maybe I don't need to invest in a sourcing tool. Maybe she can do her own sourcing and
Right.
we can keep that humanistic,
Yeah.
right? I have found you, you're great, go,
Yeah.
we're going to enter you through this process, talk to this technology, and then I'll talk to you afterwards.
Yeah.
It's very similar to when we would go find engineers. I just found this great engineer. Go take this coder test,
Yeah.
and then I'll talk to you when you're done.
Yeah.
Why can't it be applied to go to market or other areas of recruiting?
I mean, so that begs the question, and we were talking about this, previously on like downside risks, and I think it's important to share for our audience coming into this experiment that you're doing. What were downside risks that you were thinking about? Is there anything that TA leaders should be aware of as they're experimenting with AI?
I think we were very afraid that the technology would break with a candidate in real time. And that's something that I'm still very worried about. I don't want a candidate to be with an intelligence and it skipping or not working. I mean, that's horrific, right? That is the epitome of
Going
some of the
rogue.
sci-fi movies that we've seen, right? Of what the world is going to look like and skipping or whatever. But we heavily put this thing through the ringer. I mean, I personally went through about 2 or 3 different interviews where I was like, pause, I'm coming back. I'd leave the room, come back 15 minutes later. Are you still there? And they're like, we have to cancel this because you have just left for
Wow.
15. Yeah, it's very responsive and interactive, but yeah, it is a scary thing because you are putting your reputation on the line as a company.
Yeah.
And I would be remiss to say that there were some leaders here that were against it, and I'm like, let's just test it small and see how it goes. And so far it's been positive, but it's still early days, right? But there are huge risks in your reputation and the experience with a candidate. What I tell my recruiters and anybody trying to get in recruiting, that is the number one focus area that you should have. So then, of course, I know a lot of people are listening and say, Kirk, you're making them talk to technology, and now you're telling us that candidates are the most important thing. We have to find efficiency in the volume that we're facing today. And I
Yeah.
think this is going to be more and more acceptable, right?
Yeah. So it makes me wonder, coming back to, you're talking about using this in sales and
Mm-hmm.
mid-market roles. So this is a little more junior on the seniority ladder. extrapolate this out. Do you think that a similar tool could apply to other domains? Let's say engineering leadership. Do you think it stops or breaks somewhere? Is there a gap? Is there a is there a world where this is applied everywhere initially? 2035, is this going to be the new normal?
I don't, yeah. I mean, at the dinner the other night, it was an interesting mix of like old school and new school. I
Okay.
am old. I consider myself old school. We were trained, right, to be that ear, that signal for talent, assess the candidate, why they were all phone calls before COVID. Now they're all video calls, which is great because you can, kind of do a little body language reading as well. But I don't know. I have a hard time thinking that. I mean, I still recruit for executive level roles. I don't want an executive talking to some sort of a technology when I can spend 15 to 20 minutes with them and
Yeah.
probably teach the technology how
Yeah.
I was able to find signals. So I don't think we're there yet. I don't know if we're ever going to get there yet. I think that's where it stops, right? I think that's where I stop, right? And when I
Yeah.
think about this
Like that.
automation, and I'm not trying to say that people who are junior in their career don't deserve an amazing experience, but when you are hiring at volume and you're up against budgets that we're all facing today domestically and internationally, and we're trying to find that key efficiency for the team. If this can help us find that efficiency, but still maintain the experience with a certain level of individual or candidate or role, I'm willing to risk on that at this
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, well, I think fundamentally it makes sense. I think if we're just talking about years of experience as a
Mm-hmm.
barometer, like less years of experience for a role that's less complex has less complexity in the initial and in the ongoing screening process. So that matches. And an executive, of course, would have a lot more complexity in what they're being hired for and potentially would require, a more in-depth human experience during the initial interview. So, and
Well,
selling too, because if you think
yeah,
about a transactional,
yeah, yeah.
I'm just thinking in the moment, like often the more senior the role, there's more of a sell involved about why come work at Motive. And maybe there's some pivoting and discussing compensation upside or
Mm-hmm.
impact and scope or you name it. And that might be something that breaks or changes from mid to senior to VP of blank.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, when you're hiring at an executive level, they can do the job. Everybody knows that they can do the job. I'm not screening you, Anders, as an executive to say, hey, can you be the SVP of global sales? We all
Yeah,
know that you can do the job.
right.
I'm screening you for something totally different. But when you think about the roles that are more junior, right? It is black and white, block and tackle, X's and O's. Can they do this job? And I think this technology can help us identify that without a human.
Got it.
And that's really what I'm looking for. Like, even junior to mid, like maybe even mid to senior, yeah, there's some gray area in there, but when you get up to like the executive level, which I don't think this will ever touch, it may
Yeah.
or may not.
Yeah.
It's not about can you do the job. It's about, is this going to work for you? Is this great? Is there going to be cultural alignment between
Yeah.
you, the other executives, and the team that you're going to be managing?
Yeah. Well
Yeah,
said. I mean, I think
yeah.
that's the art and the science of recruiting. And I think that that's the art at the executive level of finding that pattern matching. And so who knows if a bot will do that in the future. It makes me think of kind of tying this back into we'll talk about a crystal ball here in a minute, but first I want to touch on efficiencies is the word of the day,
Yeah, it is.
both in
Yeah.
hours and dollars. And I'm curious if you can share any, let's just say this is a personal opinion. It doesn't have to be purely at Motive, but what do you forecast for efficiencies in our industry, in tech talent acquisition for time or hours saved or dollars saved now that these tools are prolific?
I'm going to go back to what I've said this a few times in the call. Take a look at sales, right?
Yeah, as the leading indicator. Wow.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're out there 5, 6, 7 years ahead of us. I'm actually going to say this now, and I've heard this from others. I think the ATS is going to be gone in the next 5 years.
Okay.
I think we're all going to be working on CRMs.
Okay.
I think thinking about recruiting in an ATS organizational way, we need to adapt more to being in sales.
Yeah.
than anything, right? And that's not eliminating the candidate experience. That's actually increasing
Yeah.
the candidate experience and thinking like a seller and less like
Wow.
an HR operator,
Yeah.
right? So I think that's really where we're going with this is,
Yeah.
I mean, I've friends of mine and colleagues of mine have known I've had this passion, like, I'm going to build the world's greatest ATS. I have kicked that dream because I think the ATS is going to be dead in maybe 5 years, maybe 8 years, whatever it is. And I don't know why we didn't adapt more to a CRM model as recruiters, similarly to the way that, the salespeople did it,
Yeah.
really, to be honest with you. So I think when I look into my crystal ball, I think that's what I see is coming. And I highly suggest everybody to start thinking about that because listen, candidates having a bad experience with any recruiter at any company makes us all look bad.
True.
Right. So if we can all mind share together and up level one another, it's not only going to help the companies that we serve, the products that we're trying to put out into the market, right? To, I'm going to use the word disrupt,
Yeah.
right? Whatever industry, but it brings what we do to the table again, right? Because, HR recruiting, it's an afterthought depending on where you're at. It's not an afterthought here at Motive, but I do hear that feedback from a lot of people like, oh, it's just HR. It's no big deal. Who you hire is very big deal,
It's
right? And the way
the
that they
most important
impact.
thing. A company is
Exactly.
composed
Yes.
of its people.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. But we need to speak the way that sales is speaking.
Well said.
We need to show data the way that
Yeah.
sales is. Like I forecast with
Yeah.
my team and I have modeled with sales ops, like how can I show this in a way where we just kill the revenue?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we speak about it in similar terms, and it has broken down so many barriers with sales executives over the last 5 years who have really enjoyed understanding our side of the business, whereas before they didn't know it and then would just get confused and frustrated,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And it breaks down that barrier.
Well, I think what you're describing, so fully agree that what I'm hearing you say is TA recruiting. We've gone through an evolution, and being a data driven organization is now standard, but it's still relatively new in the past
Yeah.
5-10 years, where we're labeling everything, every metric, every pass through rate, and using data to tell the story. And I think ultimately now the industry and talent leaders are more operationalized, process driven. Rec ops and talent ops and people ops are more and more sophisticated. I think AI tools are helping us become more efficient, with things like scheduling and of course interview recording and the summarization. And we're seeing this
References. Don't forget references.
all
Yeah.
across,
Yeah.
across the board. Yes. And I
Yeah.
think you're actually drawing, I think it's brilliant to say, watch sales and how can we mirror that um, operationality and efficiency. And I think bring more, I don't want to say clout to our domain, but being able to, right, talk about
Yeah.
what we do in a more data driven, revenue tied way. I think that would be good. That would be good for everyone. And ultimately, my when we look at some Copilot AI tools, how is this going to change our industry? I think what we're seeing, I think the use case that you just described with the individual on your team doing mid-market sales recruiting, I actually think will be mirrored across many other recruiting domains, which is incremental efficiency. At some point of, you said 50% of her time is now being focused on building relationships and whatnot. And I think we're going to see that as adoption increases across the board. So TA teams will certainly be more efficient. They won't be fully replaced. That was a big
No.
fear like a year ago.
Never.
I think
No.
we're seeing there's evidence that can't and won't be. But I think that TA, whether you're a sourcer, recruiter, or a talent leader, has to learn how to use AI tools and interface with an agentic tool in a way to give it commands, calibrate and iterate so that it does what you need it to do. And recruiters that don't adopt and they're kind of stuck in the keyword bingo, maybe they're, I don't want to say stuck on only LinkedIn, but if they can't adopt to a new stack, they might be left behind.
Yeah, possibly. I didn't answer your other question. You asked if, recruiting teams, we're going to see a downsize in terms of like the human capital or human resources that we
Yeah.
need to keep. Again, sales has not shrunk in any way. They keep asking us for more AEs, more
Touche.
SDRs, more SEs. more operations folks to support them. They have all the technology at their fingertips that we don't have today. We're not seeing them grow in terms of human capital efficiencies at all. So, if anything, I think there's going to be a further investment in recruiting, but if you have to understand how it moves and it's going to evolve in terms of relating it to the business so that they can see the value in what we bring, right? Because that's where it drops off. I think it was this side of like 6 months ago where on one of those famous podcasts here in the Valley, they're like, HR is dead and you don't need HR leaders anymore, right? And it was like, yeah, that was
Sure.
a really cool thing to say, man. Thanks.
Yeah.
You know, there are humans on the
Hey,
other end of that have made a living of this and have
yeah.
probably saved you
Yeah.
or others from making serious mistakes that you have
Yeah.
forgotten about. And we are all in this together, right? HR and recruiting, we're together. We're the brother, the sister, the cousins, whatever you want to call us, right? And until that starts to really separate, right, we need to make each other stronger, right, and show that value. And this is how you do it.
Yeah, well said. I think if you're tuning in today and had a fear about how AI is replacing jobs or you're behind, I hope you feel more well informed now. And I think the best evidence, as Kirk just said really clearly, sales teams have all the tools at their disposal. And if they're a few years ahead of us in terms of implementing cutting edge, tooling, infrastructure, maybe even having more spend for such, and that they're not being replaced but built out with more people, well, I
Yeah.
think there's a strong signal
Yeah.
that we might follow that same path. Although the role is evolving as a people leader, talent leader, and then our direct reports, where agentic workflows and automation is here, and it's how do you use that, how do you adopt, how do you become more efficient and build better relationships. And so I've learned a lot from you, Kirk, about how you've done this at Motive, and I hope people have tuning in today as well. Final question: as you look, let's say 3 years from now, what does a TA team look like? How does it differ from
That's a good question. I think we will invest in TA operations differently. I think it'll look more like sales operations,
yeah.
honestly, where it's helping more. Like there are tools, position management tools out there, like another name drop, sorry, but like Caro, who is helping us position management and connect with finance faster than we ever have in the past, not relying on, and again, it's a CRM that
Yeah.
sits on
There you
top
go.
of Workday,
Yeah.
right? And communicates with Greenhouse. It's this middle piece,
Interesting.
that they have built where I haven't gone to Workday to open up a position in 2 months,
Wow.
nor have my stakeholders.
Yeah.
And we're just using this CRM that sits on top of that HRIS system. But that's an investment in operations that creates this connectivity now that I have with finance to be able to forecast spend for the company. That's where we're going.
You're
That's how it's
reducing
different.
friction to increase this deal velocity or hiring
Exactly.
velocity.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. That's where it's going. It doesn't matter if you're on the technical side, you're on the G&A side, and I've said a lot about sales. I grew up as a G&A recruiter. I've been on the end side. I have been on the go-to-market side. I do both today. It doesn't matter which side of the fence you're on. This is going to apply to you regardless, right? Because even when I look at the executive meetings that I'm a part of, the engineers are more involved in the go-to-market stuff than they ever have been because they have to understand what the customer needs.
Yeah.
We all do, right? But think about who your customer is. It's the business, but number one, it's the candidate,
Yeah.
right? And if you
Yeah.
can find a way to infuse this technology to still maintain, if not accelerate, an even better experience. At first, it may not feel better. They may feel frustrated. But in the end, if it can create them to have better conversations with the recruiters rather than, hey, Anders, tell me about yourself,
Yeah.
that's what we're for.
Well, it reminds me. So I guess my signing off phrase will be, you just made me think of the age old phrase of time kills all deals. And often in recruiting, especially the smaller the organization, they'll claim that their speed is their secret sauce. And perhaps now with these tools, that speed will be accessible to organizations as large as Motive and larger. So only time will tell. But if you're tuning in today to the Lean In podcast, I hope you learned something today. I hope you're excited about the future. Kirk, I'm excited after our chat and want to thank you for joining the show. Until
Thank you
next
very
time,
much. Yeah,
take care,
appreciate
everyone.
it.
Bye.